So, this is number one. Is the world's weirdest drug market New Zealand? Wonder if it's really hard to get drugs in New Zealand.
New Zealand is probably most famous as the location for the Lord of the Rings movies. But there's a lot more going on here than just elves and hobbits. The world centers for developing new psychoactive substances.
And that's the problem, is when you have things like this made illegal, all you're doing is creating a black market. And then it's just a never-ending battle to synthesize something different, so then it's legal for a little bit until they catch on.
Devastating consequences.
With synthetic cannabis, if I don't get it for a couple of days,
bro,
in my lungs,
people literally have physical addictions to fucking this synthetic cannabis. I feel bad for people and I remember when I was in high school and it was rolling around a bit and people were doing it.
That's how New Zealand became one of the world's weirdest drug markets, and how the entire war on drugs there was almost ended by this guy, a steampunk rock star named Starboy.
You and your fucking weirdness. Party on, Garth.
Napoleon famously claimed that geography is destiny, and when it comes to New Zealand's war on drugs, he might have been right. New Zealand is about 6,000 miles from South America, 8,000 from Afghanistan, and has a population of nearly 5 million, about half that of a city like London. What that has meant is that for many years, cartels didn't really smuggle many drugs to New Zealand. The market was just too small for them to bother.
Drugs like cocaine, heroin have not been particularly popular here.
Of course, fewer drugs than other people. It just means they take different drugs, come up with their own solutions. And what they found is that aside from drinking a load of booze, they could manufacture their own methamphetamine.
Strange. Fucking strange. I don't know anyone out there watching, I'm sure, has been affected in some way by the war on drugs, whether it's having someone addicted, getting in trouble, police officer, father, dealing with drugs, raids, whatever. I don't know. It's not a fun circle.
Who's using meth?
Who is using meth?
What type of people?
A lot. Everyone,
every class.
Yeah.
Every class.
Everyone uses drugs. This illusion that if we just fucking fight it, this war, this never-ending war that we've spent probably trillions of dollars on has just failed. Actually, let's look at that. We're gonna play this.
Politicians, I can't name you a class of people or a particular profession that's immune. It's throughout New Zealand society.
So things that can be produced in New Zealand, so methamphetamine, prescription opioids, they're the most popular drugs.
It is estimated that over $1 trillion has been poured by the state and federal government in the past 4 decades to wage war on drugs. $1 trillion. T, not even a B, bro. I don't even think your mind comprehends how much fucking money that is.
But in an illegal market, it can cause real damage to people's lives. Drug war takes a very unexpected turn, because this is when we meet Matt Bowden.
Matt Bowden.
Starboy. He plays steampunk-inspired glam rock under the name Starboy. He's also a drug entrepreneur who made millions of dollars producing psychoactive chemicals in New Zealand and very nearly changed the world.
I had a family member who unfortunately lost their life after taking too much ecstasy, and another friend ended their life using crystal meth, and it sort of cemented for me a feeling that I needed to get involved in developing safer alternatives and that we needed to have quality control.
Wow, actually, Starboy's kind of right. You do need to have quality control, because people, even now with fentanyl, I couldn't imagine being a heroin addict right now.
The chemical that Bowden eventually settled on was BZP, which he and others sold as party pills all over New Zealand.
BZP.
We got a team of scientists together and looked for a safer alternative to crystal meth. We found in the research...
This is the other thing, a safer alternative crystal meth. Technically, Adderall is pretty well up there with what meth is. I mean, you're not smoking it, it's just a pill and you get it from a doctor and everyone thinks it's alright, which, I mean, I'm not knocking people who have ADHD and take that shit, but look at how many people get addicted and all that. I mean, abuse.
And an antidepressant, and we knew this was a lot safer and non-addictive. So for 8.5 years, we sold 26 million pills to 400,000 consumers on
how many died?
A million occasions.
How many died?
No deaths and no lasting injuries.
Wow! When something's regulated and controlled and not just fucking made in the middle of a jungle or in someone's bathtub, amazing.
BZP
quality
became
control.
wildly popular, with 5 million pills being sold every year and evidence indicating that 1/5 of the entire population had tried the drug once. And this was all completely legal. BZP was such a new chemical that the authorities hadn't even had time to ban it.
The price of meth dropped and there was an oversupply, and it was obvious that it's because the safer alternative had displaced it from the market. What it proved was that if you make a safer alternative available, that consumers will trend towards that.
But just because party pills were legal doesn't mean they were regulated. They were sold everywhere from corner shops to petrol stations, with no age restrictions or health advice. And in 2008, the government banned BZP altogether.
Oh no. And let me guess. We're about to hear, and they see that dramatic spike in methamphetamine fucking cases.
Raft of new products.
Or just making something new. That's
completely untested, unregulated, being sold through corner stores, no controls on age or promotions, etc.
But the ban didn't mean people stopped making legal highs. All that developed was a game of cat and mouse where the government would ban a
exactly like what I was saying. It's just changing it just enough, tweaking something just enough, or finding that chemical.
certain chemical, then the underground chemist would tweak the molecule slightly to make a new legal one and sell it for a few months before it was eventually banned.
Wow.
They're working on drying out in a new synthetic compound that they've manufactured. Even if this lab were to be stopped, it's done in hundreds of thousands of other labs in China.
Jesus Christ, dude.
Another one will always pick up the slack. There's just too much money in it.
This is the pattern of so-called legal highs all over the world.
They're the party drugs that are sold.
Just imagine now a world where society didn't look at drugs as such like this taboo negative thing, and just in the fact that everyone uses them and they're just chemicals. The way you use them defines like the whole principle of them. Like, I mean, if you take a bunch of PCP and go out in the middle of the street, yeah, you're probably not gonna have a good fucking time. But there's people who do PCP and they have profound experiences. It's just, there's many different variables, and a lot of it is impacted by the fact that it's illegal. If there was safeguards in places or things to actually do them, it probably would benefit society greatly.
Within the law. No sooner does the government ban one, another is produced.
Yeah.
It's how drugs like spice and bar salts developed from relatively stable.
I remember when bath salts came out. Sorry, I'm being a pause, Andy. But when bath salts came out, it tripped me out because I was like, why the fuck are people going to Bath and Body Works snorting this shit? Like, that's insane. Until I found out, I was like, no, it's basically like meth.
Compounds to the highly unpredictable and problematic street drugs they are today. The only difference in New Zealand was Matt Bowden. Matt saw that these chemicals were becoming more and more dangerous and lobbied the government for a better system.
Yeah.
And unusually in global drug policy, the New Zealand government actually listened to the experts.
Drug policy was set out in a way where they wanted to reduce supply and demand. And so I identified myself as a representative of the nightclubbing dance community and said, well, for our group, we have another solution, which is to reduce demand by meeting those consumer needs with an alternative product.
Right.
And they agreed that this did.
It's almost like what doctors use with either, it started with methadone clinics, now it's Suboxone. I've even seen larger different forms of Suboxone being on commercials.
With the overarching
but that's because of the
drug policy,
opiate problem that we
reduce
had.
harm to consumers.
In 2013, they passed the world's first major attempt at a fully regulated market for legal highs.
The idea was, well, how about if we
Good
just
deal.
set the standard the same as in medicine? If you just set up your laws in such a way that there is a pathway to market for psychoactive drugs, a developer just needs to show that the drug is safe enough. That pathway's there, then that, like a magnet, will just attract all the
Think about that. When it's actually regulated and is set to a certain standard.
capital that's required to move that forward.
This was a revolutionary policy. Sales of party pills were banned to under 18s, and new licensing requirements restricted where the product could be sold. For a moment, it looked like New Zealand might just make history. But there was a problem. All the legal drugs that had been available were banned. Are still allowed on paper. A technicality was added to the law that prohibited testing on animals, essentially making new products impossible to develop.
Ethically, or it can be done without cruelty.
But as always, banning certain products didn't mean people stopped trying to get high.
No fucking way. It's strange. It's like once you take out that regulated thing, they're just gonna go back to that. It's not like, well, I guess we can't do it anymore. People are always gonna fucking do drugs, no matter what it is.
Way cheaper than weed and have much more of like.
It's horrible.
So that's how I got.
Just
into
doing
it.
G-bong rips of fucking spice, bro.
I just needed it to cope.
That's
The
gnarly.
government's to blame. They're the only people to blame. Of course, it's gonna go underground, and then people are gonna start making shit that is harmful.
Crucially, after the ban on party pills, people also went back to using meth.
No. Insane. It's not like that would happen.
even greater amounts than before. And
yeah, because you created this society where you had a regulated thing, and now it's
as always,
not there anymore.
Drugs, this has hit the poorest and most marginalized communities the hardest.
Problematic use of methamphetamine within already disadvantaged communities is tied to poverty, racism, colonization, deprivation, and so on.
But now, things are different. Because of New Zealand's isolation, the price of drugs there is much higher than it is in, say, the US or Europe. In fact, a kilo of meth can reach over 10 times the price in New Zealand than it does in the States. As fast as it
I would assume it's probably a lot harder to get drugs into New Zealand.
have now begun to pay attention.
Estamos en lo que viene siendo
Clandestine labs just in the middle of fucking nowhere. Look at this. Went from regulated in a lab to look, this guy has a fucking clock. Look, it went right back to what I said it was going to, in a fucking middle of nowhere.
Saliendo en 4,000. En Nueva Zelanda lo estamos vendiendo. Tenemos un cliente de. Pues el mercado de Nueva Zelanda para nosotros es muy importante.
Cartels from Mexico are now allying with biker gangs and displacing the DIY meth labs. And this is creating new levels of violence as
Whoa. It's like when you have a black market for drugs that somehow it creates violence.
gangs compete to control the expanding market.
Education.
Drug deaths and gang
The more
violence
you know.
have reached unprecedented levels in New Zealand. And all this might have been avoided had Matt Bowden and his safer, legal party pills been given a chance.
Yeah. No shit.
To make drugs, but winning the war on drugs.